get this going. All right, everybody, I am going to mute everyone, and then Randy, you will unmute yourself in a minute. Randy,
good to go?
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you all for joining
Excellent.
Randy and myself today. I appreciate it tremendously. I want to give you a heads up on a couple of things. At the bottom of your screen is a chat box, chat function. If you have questions, please feel free to type them in there. I'll relay them to Randy, and anything you want to know. He's a wealth of knowledge, and so happy to he'll answer questions. He's also pretty much an open book. I wanted to let y'all know that the next Zoom is going to be on May 18th, the next Clarice Zoom, with Michael Brown, formerly of Costa Brown and now of Cirque and Chev. So mark that one on your calendar as well. And then finally, make sure you drink throughout this. Randy and I both were agreeing earlier that it's much more fun if the audience drinks with us, and we are more entertaining that way as well. So Randy, thank you for being here.
Oh, it's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. Tell everybody where you are right now. You are not in our fair Sonoma County, I understand.
No, I am actually in the little town of Tequila down in Jalisco, Mexico right now. And you'd think I'd be celebrating the Cinco de Mayo. Well, spiritually I am, but hardly anybody here does that. And the wine goes straight to the road.
Have you partaken in some tequila since you've been down there, I hope?
Oh yeah, all kinds.
Okay, good.
It's a pretty interesting town. It's kind of an unknown little town. I think it's one of those World Heritage sites, right? Actually, okay. But it's really beautiful. Instead of being in Sonoma County, driving around, seeing vineyards left and right, here you see all these beautiful blue agave plantations all over the place, on the hills, the mountains and such. And it's really a pretty scene. Very mountainy and rocky, volcanic type soils, and it's really cool.
How do you get there? Where do you fly into?
The easiest way is to fly into Guadalajara, and then it's about an hour and 10 minutes if there's no traffic, and hour and 50 minutes if there's a lot of traffic. A drive to Tequila. Another way to go is to Puerto Vallarta. Then it's a 3-hour drive from there.
Okay. You've been before, or is this?
I've been several times here. It's a fun little spot on this great earth.
So let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are right now. It's was a bit of a journey. I mean, I think I read that your father did like home winemaking. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's. I guess that's probably where the bug first bit me. Was when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. We lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then up along Lake Erie, you have both Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. That's a great grape belt there. More for Concords and jelly, and also the hybrids for unique wines. But he started a little hobby of home winemaking, and I thought that was pretty amazing that you could turn grape juice into wine with a nice little alcohol hit to it, and that was fun. And then I think that kind of led me into enjoying wine. When you're 14, 15, back in the day, you would be like heading off into drinking as much beer as you could, and I was never one for effervescent products, and so I elected to go off with a few friends and down the wine road, starting with oh god, I can't even think of the name right now, but it was a little screw top bottle. Sure. I can't think of it the second, but Strawberry Hill kind of type stuff. Yep. And that was my high school period, and then got into actually more like French wines and this, that, and the other thing, and then what happened after that was I liked rocks and minerals and mining and skiing. And so when I graduated from high school in Pittsburgh, I figured I needed to, find a good school for mining engineering that also had good skiing nearby. So there's really are only three schools: University of Arizona, University of Utah, and the Colorado School of Mines. And of those three states, the state with the best snow is Utah. It's got the driest, deepest powder. So that's where I went, and to start, I had a major going in mining engineering with a minor in skiing, and the skiing kind of took over the mining part, especially the first year when you have all those classes you can't really stand. And so I had a lot of fun out there. And then, how when you're your first year off and about, you tend to, go home, your parents miss you and they have you come back for Christmas, which I did. And lo and behold, much to my surprise, my report card showed up there. I thought they were going to send it to me in Utah. And when my for this, it said, "Oh my, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go back and I'll check out, get you refunded everything, and I'll just take it from there." And I did that and continued skiing and doing this and that and the other thing. And then, of course, what do you do when the snow runs out? I don't know if anyone's ever read that book, The Endless Summer. Well, I was on the endless winter path. And so from there, I ended up going down to Chile. The plan was to go to Chile for a 3-month trip, 1 month to go skiing there, and then sell all the equipment and kind of work our way. I went down with my friend of mine, and we were going to then work our way back to America and call it a trip. Well, we were very, very, very naive and did not know the political situation there. I didn't even know that they were going to have a lot of wine there, but we got there and it was like the country was on a lockdown because it was a democratically elected socialist government quickly going to communism. Yeah. And there was no law, there was no rules, there was no nothing. It was total chaos. And when we got there, both the left side and the right were on strike, and we couldn't get to Portillo, which is the main ski area there. And so everybody said, "You better get out of town, head south." And we did that. And there are other ski areas down in the southern part of the country on volcanoes. So we decided to pick this one called Pucón. And we got on the train, an overnight train, like you see in the Wild West, and get there and find out that the ski area shut down the year before because the volcano had exploded. And so it kind of wiped out a lot of the lifts. So we ended up spending the night in a hotel on a lake. And ironically, staying in this hotel was the not the ambassador, but the consular of the U.S. Embassy. And so when we sat down with them I said, "What the hell is going on around here?" And they said, "You don't know?" We go, "No, we have no clue." And they said, "Well, it's first of all, Americans aren't really looked upon very nicely down here because they're going pro-Russia, pro-Cuba, pro-Castro, anti-America. But one thing that's interesting is there's a great black market here." And so when we had gotten to the country, we had to declare how many days we were going to be there and change X number of dollars a day at the bank rate. And then we learned that you could get, like 20, 30 times that on the black market. So all of a sudden, $1 was worth a mint. And when we figured that out, it cost us to stay 3 years. And we also learned that there was a huge wine country. And if you didn't drink wine, like in America in those days, 70s, late 60s and 70s, there weren't that many wine drinkers. It was spirits and beer. And in Chile, wasn't much in spirits and wasn't much in beer, but boy, everybody was expected to drink wine. When you went into a restaurant, it was already preset with a white wine glass and red wine glass. So I thought I'd died and gone to heaven there because I moved from Boone's Farm, up past Lancers and Almaden and all of that. And now I was into, Chile and Conchi Toro and the bottle that looked like Matus, but it was from Unduraga.
Yep.
It was called Rhine and Pinot, all these crazy names. But then I met a lot of different people down there. And one person kind of took me under his wing and taught me all about wine in general, fine wines, wine of the world, food and wine. And I thought, wow, this is great.
Did you think of staying down there? Or, I mean,
Well, I stayed 3 years. When
right,
I was
I know, but I mean, what led you back, I guess, to the States then? It sounds pretty fantastic right there.
Well, it was too good to be true.
Yeah.
And we ended up with we had a farm in the south of Chile. We had a condo in Santiago, a house on the coast that all cost next to nothing. And but what led me to come back was 9 months before I came back, there was the coup that actually worked, and it went from extreme left to Nazi-esque extreme right dictatorship. So all your rights to talk and think and discuss and read and radios were all eliminated, and they knocked off 4,000 people that first night, and then another 12,000 were tortured, and this, that, and the other thing. And so it wasn't much fun. And they had what's called a toque de queda curfew, and so you weren't allowed out after dusk or before dawn, and that's when they did more of the sort of cleansing of the questionable folks. You never knew if they were going to knock on your door because you'd piss somebody off, and they would just turn you in. And so that gets old, hearing the gun stuff. So I thought, I think I'm going to leave. And so I came back and really appreciated America more than ever at that point. That was also the Vietnam War era. And when I got back, I was now on a mission that I was going to get paid to drink wine. And to do that, I went back to school real quick and studied viticulture and enology, actually at Ohio State, because that's where my family had then moved to. And I kind of went in under their address to get the low cost tuition. And then I was solid fixated on getting my degrees.
I read that you actually graduated summa cum laude, as opposed to like the bum that was skiing before you left.
Yeah, like the way down to right at the top.
Yep.
And so, I think that probably made my father a little happier, even though he's a optical physicist of sorts from MIT, and the fact that his son, didn't go that far into science and went into like farming, Jesus. But here we are today. And so I got a job in Ohio for a little under a year for a harvest there, helping a winery get started. And then the funny thing is, I figured, okay, maybe I should go out to California and get a job, or stay in the East Coast where it's nice and green and fresh. And I sent a bunch of resumes out to California and went out, and actually was offered a job at Buena Vista at the end of the day. But I had been driving around California, and coming from the East Coast, everything's so green and lush, and I'm driving around this desolate, dried up dust bowl, thinking, who in their right mind would want to live here? And so I turned the job down, and because I thought, there's no way I'm going to live here, and went back and took a job in upstate New York. And then after about 5 years there, realized, well, that's kind of like a one-way street to nowhere. And of course, I was more into the vinifera style varieties, and definitely not into the hybrids or the American varieties at all. And I tried to actually get some Chardonnay grafted and growing there, and they all thought I was nuts. And I thought, oh, maybe it's time to try this again, and just suck it up, and sent a few resumes back out to California, and went out and raced around and did a bunch of interviews, and ended up falling in love with the Russian River in Sonoma County, West Sonoma County, and got a job at Deloach Vineyards.
So at Deloach, I mean, one of the things I wanted to talk about this, the opportunity to work with some of those old Zinfandel vineyards. I mean, I made under the Novi label for a while there, Papera, Paletti, Carlisle, now it's what it's called, but and Barbieri.
Oh, those were all our favorite little. Those are all.
Yeah.
Ours are under contract by us in those days when I was there, and things sort of changed and they became more available to others. But when I started, the reason I was hired actually is because Cecil was just starting up, and he was going to start out with 4,000 cases, focusing on Chardonnay, white Zin for cash flow, and Zin and Pinot Noir. But I knew the farming, so I could drive a tractor and do the vineyard stuff. I built 2 houses in New York, so I was good at construction and also the winemaking. So I kind of was in third seas there. And then as we started to grow, it was less vineyard, construction, winemaking, and then no construction, just all winemaking as we grew. But the sort of the sad part, you look back but it was just the time. But we would we would make Zinfandel out of all those, and then we'd also be making white Zinfandel at the same time with these killer, wonderful old heritage vineyards. And then after a couple of years, I would keep some of these truly separate. And then one day, showed Cecil, I said, look at this. If you do this like vineyard designate, taste this. And I tried it on some of the visiting like distributors and sales folks, and they all loved it. And that's how that whole program started, the OFS, our finest selection. And then we did a Chardonnay.
I heard other wording for OFS. Is that really? I always heard out fucking standing, but is it really our finest selection?
It's a military term that Cecil came up with, but okay. you have to use it, sparingly depending on who you're with.
Yes.
But yes, that is the strict, unadulterated version of the definition of OFS.
Okay, let me ask you something. I've heard before, and you kind of validated it, but I want to get a little bit. White Zinfandel may have kept some of these, the old vineyards around, given, I'm not trying to denigrate white Zin, but it wasn't anything that I drink an awful lot of now, that kind of thing. But it was probably really helpful in keeping some of these properties going. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. It did help keep them, because otherwise people would have probably ripped them out and, put in Pinot or Chardonnay or what have you. Sure. That was a unique era, because when I started, it was sort of the tail end of a glut. What did people do with all these grapes? And so, for better or for worse, the white Zin movement hit. We had a nice white Zin that had flavor and color, versus some that had no color, very little flavor. And it truly saved them. And to this day, some of those ranches I've noted, have gone by the wayside and been replanted with Pinot, but there are some, that you would never want to do that to, because it's irreplaceable, irrepeatable. They should all be like a national historic treasure.
Yeah, well, there is the Heritage Vineyard Society, and that's the type of thing that I agree with you. These places need to be preserved and adored. We all need to stand up for keeping them around.
Absolutely, they're so special. And they're all, sometimes people would start to cheat a little bit and they put some drip irrigation in, but the proper ones are still dry farmed, and they've been there for, 80, 90, 100 years now, or 100 or more. Time flies when you're having fun, but they are old. And of course the yields go down, but if you do it right and you come up with a nice priced bottle, you can justify that. And they're wonderful.
Yeah. So what led you from Deloach then to Jackson family? What was the?
Well, I was still maintaining my ties with Chile. So I would still go down there a lot to visit my old friends. And on a few trips, I learned that Jess Jackson had been down there, and Don Hartford. Sometimes we'd end up in the same winery, but within a week's time difference. And I thought that was kind of funny. And I had let Cecil know that someday I was going to retire and leave and go to Chile. And I think word probably got out. And Jess, and we were also renowned for our Chardonnay, and a little for our Pinot, but more our Chardonnay. And Deloach and Jess Jackson started basically the same year, which is kind of interesting. And both ended up on a Chardonnay kind of path. And so Jess, that probably, I was there for 12 and a half years. And so we started in 1981, 1993 is when I went to work with Jess, but 5 years before that. So he had asked me if I would come work with him. And I was having way too much fun with Cecil, and everything was just going great. So I kind of said, not really. And then after a few more years with Cecil and learning that I was really going to be like chained to the winery and the tanks, and I couldn't really go anywhere, and I like to travel, just came back, and he knew I had this love for Chile. And he said to me, well, Randy, I'd like you to come on board. I want you to, be our winemaker someday, but I have 3 projects for you right in the beginning. And one was to go down to Chile and start a winery and a brand. So here I'm going down to my favorite other country, and I'm getting paid for it, and be a part owner of this thing with him. And then he asked if I would reopen Ed Mead's, which he bought a few years earlier and just mothballed up in the Anderson Valley.
Yep.
And then he wanted to start a new project out of Santa Barbara called Camelot. It's the brand Camelot. We don't have it anymore. And so I thought, wow, this is too good to be true. And he had it was hard to say no to him because of his infectious personality and vivacious spirit and smile and enthusiasm. So I came on board, and I was one of the guys who was hired by him. So when I showed up, nobody knew I was supposed to be there in one of those situations. And then it was sort of the end of the summer. So bang, the first order of business was go down to Santa Barbara, get that whole show going, and then get up to Ed Mead's, because that's normally how the harvest works. And so went up to the Anderson Valley and got that show on the road. And then off when harvest was over, I went straight down to Chile and started scouting around. Since I already knew the area, I had an advantage, and came up with a plan there, and came back. And on February 26th, that very next year, we were crushing grapes down there, and everything had been set up with just a handshake while we were dealing with the bureaucracy and the legalities of it all. So that was a blast in the beginning there. And he really appreciated what I did in Chile and asked me to set up a winery and vineyards in Argentina. Tapiz was ours, and then we ultimately sold it when they had the exchange rate issue there, and we, our $12 million investment overnight became a $4 million investment, and he didn't like that. But I was also in charge of the stave mill over in France, and in its early days, when we were not only making staves and for barrels, but we were selling furniture wood and transfer logs and veneer logs, and we were doing it from start to finish. And that was pretty hard. So now we just focus on the staves. But I was the manager of that. The Australian project over in we'd all go over there, go to these countries and kind of travel all around and figure out where would I put a wine. Sure. And land and vineyards. And a lot of it was more a la Sonoma County than say Napa. So that's why we're in McLaren Vale in Australia. And then I also worked, when I started, they just bought the land in Italy, so I managed that. I did all the international stuff. So I was the manager of Tenuta d'Arceno for a while, many years, and with the original replants there. We had a project way up in the north, also of Italy, and way in the south. A little, actually, Zinfandel from Puglia down, and then there was the more commercial grade Zin, Primitivo down in the Boot. And then we had another project in France, because that was back in the day when Mondavi had gone over there and started a project and then pissed off their neighbors. But we went over there, we're trying to be nice to our neighbors. And that project didn't come to culmination, because just as we were getting ready to put all the blends from all the different wineries where I had everything together, they started to not follow the protocol or the rules. And so we basically told them to take a hike and quit that. But after, I think that's probably 4 or 5 years worth of stuff there. And then he asked if I'd take over KJ, the brand, and then travel maybe a little less. So
yeah, I was going to ask, was that a good thing for you? I mean, were you enjoying the traveling at the time, or was it too much? Was it?
Oh, no, I love traveling. So it wasn't too much at all. It was great. But
so did you hesitate at all with KJ, or not really? I mean,
yeah, I did. I said, Jess, I still want to, I have all these projects to finish. And he said, yeah, I understand. But remember, you know, KJ pays the bill. KJ's, you know, at the time was maybe 800,000 cases or so, or 900,000. And he said, you know, those other ones don't even add up to 100,000. So just remember that, Randy. I took that as a hint that I should be focusing more on California and Kendall-Jackson. And then, so all of those kind of went off and became, were managed by actually the people in country, except for Chile. I still work on that one to this date.
So
But
the Vineyards Reserve Chardonnay, which I've got here, which is, I don't know if you call it the flagship or certainly the leading quantity, I believe. I mean, of all the wines that you make and all that, and it's the one that is, you find it everywhere. You're drinking it right now. Explain to somebody who, I mean, I've made wine in different places, but nothing anywhere like what you have. I've made wine of decent size, but nothing like anything you do here. How can you make, I mean, this is a decent sized quantity of wine, but yet it's all barrel fermented. Yet it's all, I mean, from vineyards fairly up and down the coast. I guess Santa Barbara all the way up here. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary effort to be able to pull that together on a consistent basis. I'm in awe, honestly.
yeah, it was. So when I first started, I was in awe of the complexity of it, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But it really has become a well oiled group of people and machine, because the majority of the vineyards are our own, which helps a lot. And we now have, you know, wineries in all of these different locations. In the beginning, we had nothing in Monterey, and 50% of our grapes are in Monterey. So, you know, building the winery there helped a lot. But there's an art to this, you know, or a technique. You know, we're able to maintain the consistency by using the same percentages within a percentage point or two of the different regions, the appellations, because each one gives you a different character on a bell curve perspective and aroma. You know, you're like, you know, and then you can get all these flavors in each of these areas. But if you have 100 or 200 wines in front of you, there becomes a bell curve of what's there. And so the Anderson Valley and Upper Mendocino give you that sort of crisp green apple, the ripe apple from, of course, Russian River and all that, and pear oil from Carneros, and the lemon and lime Monterey, and all that tropical fruit from Santa Barbara. So we try to keep that going and more or less the same. And we have it's mostly our own grapes, or if it's an outside grower, normally it's a 3-year contract. So that helps with that continuity. We have a great team who've been around for a while. I'm in my, I guess, 28th year now. But there's folks like Mark Thies, you know, and Fritz Meyer and gang who have been working with me and with the company for almost as long, you know, 25 and so years. So, you know, our pre-harvest meetings used to take 2 days. Now our pre-harvest meetings, we can just about do it in an hour. And so once you kind of get going, it just becomes second nature. But there is a trick to it, you know, making it all work and fit and all of that. But we've tried to maintain our style, if not improve it, every year, just a little bit, which is fun.
Don't you, I mean, I've always thought this, as a winemaker, you're only as good to some extent as the team that you have around you, the people that are with you. I mean, it's, you know, on a daily basis. I'm amazed, and I've seen you travel up and down the coast as much as you do during harvest and that type of thing. But there is somebody there in the Monterey facility on a daily basis taking care of things, and you have to be dependent upon them.
Absolutely. Well, get them trained and delegate, and you know, let them know that, you know, and give them the, you know, the ability to make decisions. And, you know, once you say, okay, you know, I think systems are all good to go ahead and go. And, you know, we believe in you. And if, you know, if you make a error, you know, well, we'll learn from it, but don't make too many, but for sure. But you know, that you develop the same palate and the same taste profile and sort of the same goals, and it all works out great.
I always thought the key, I mean, you're mentioning the error there. To me, the key was I've made a lot of mistakes, but I have tended not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And that's that's a worthwhile
Yeah.
thing as a winemaker.
Yeah, and that's why it's also nice to have people that have worked, with you for such a long time. I mean, I've been around for like almost 3 decades. So you see people come, you see people go, see people come in and say, oh, let's try this. Well, we've already tried it. Don't waste your time. But then, oh, go ahead, try it, because you won't believe me. You're going to go try it and realize it doesn't work. And so you have to kind of let folks do that. You can't be too dictatorial. But definitely, there's a learning curve,
Yeah,
for sure.
The barrel fermentation, that process alone though is time consuming, as opposed to like, you got one big tank, you can measure when it's dry, or you can measure when ML is done, or that kind of thing. When you do barrel fermentation, there's a myriad of differences there.
Oh, yeah, there certainly are. We have a lot of barrels, and we pride ourselves in using only real barrels, that they're not stainless steel barrels or tanks with chips or staves or whatever you want to use. We're true to our statements. Chardonnay 100% barrel ferment. We're not at 100, but we go in hit about 95. Pretty darn good year in, year out. And we stir the lees on all these barrels, once a month for this wine, and twice a month for all the other Chardonnays. And it's a feat. But as we grew, you had to figure out, well, how do you deal with all these barrels? And so a lot of stuff we've come up with started out sitting in usually a Mexican restaurant / bar, and drawing something on the back of a napkin. How can we get at this a barrel line? We said when we were creating Monterey, we need to have like barrels go by something and have like you're getting your oil changed, where all the hoses come down from the roof, so they're not on the floor, and in it goes, out it goes, and keep it going. And that little drawing became reality, and
Sure.
now we just fixed it up. And we do everything in a small winery way, small winery mentality. We are just very efficient and do a lot of it. But ironically, we keep everything separate. Adam, I don't know if you're aware of that, but when we're doing our like just a Chardonnay, in a normal year, we'll have like 1,000 lots.
Okay.
And of course, that's a lot of extra work, of course, because
Yeah.
keep everything separate. And the lab has more work, and we hear about it from the general management, of course. We say, no, we're all about quality, we're not about quantity. And that's what got us here. And so it's definitely harder and more challenging, especially when you're trying to put all these blends together from all over the place. But it can't be.
Over time, you mentioned, the consistency of the wine and all that, but you also mentioned improving over time somewhat. Has the style changed at all over the years? I mean, slowly, or your palate, or just the direction, any of those things? Or...
Well, yeah, I mean, when I started, it was only 60% barrel fermented. In the first year that I took over for KJ, I showed Jess after the harvest what 80, 90, and 100% would taste like and feel like in his mouth. And he fell in love with it. And he said, well, how fast can we get there? It was like just as fast as we possibly could. So that was a huge improvement. Also, when I took over, he asked me to go 100%. And I thought, oh, now that's like the kiss of death, because there was always a couple percent of like Riesling, or maybe a little 0.5% of Muscat or something in there. And I thought, oh my God, this is like, I just got shot. And so that was fixed and massaged by using all the different clones that were available, and planting things like the more Dijon clones that have more sort of the perfumey tones. A lot of the Rued, then came the 809, and then came the Z, which is the Muscat version of Chardonnay. So we have a lot of that in there. And then also, it was relatively sweet when it first started. It's dried out and dried out and dried out. The other thing is, we've done replanting in the vineyards and worked more with the clones and the site. So the quality of the grapes is going up, and the site. And then going back to the barrels, which we love. I don't know how familiar I'm sure you're very familiar, but the folks that are listening with us this evening and this afternoon, there are all these different forests in France, and they're kind of like different appellations for grapes in California. Some people believe this, some people don't, but I truly believe, because we've done the analysis so many times, the forests are different. And then within that, you can say the grain tightness is different, and it is for sure. But there are flavors, and like the key behind the vintners is the Vosges forest, because it has a sweet oak tone to it and a sweetness. And so that's that, and Chardonnay from the coast is a match made in heaven. But on top of that, and dialing in the aging of the staves also, we have boatloads of research on that. And then more importantly is, once you've got your barrel or your staves, and then you're going to make your barrel, you have to toast it. At least we do. And so there's a lot of ways to toast a barrel. And so we have over 100, probably 150 ways to toast a barrel right now. And we've tried, and we used to send some of our staves to all the other coopers just to see, and then analyze that and figure out, well, what are they doing? How can we make a Francois Ferrer barrel or a Damy barrel or all that? Because they have a little signature also. And so we were able to, to emulate that, and then take that and even make them even better. And on top of that, more consistent. Because in the old days, you could have 4 barrels from the same cooper, same toast, and all 4 barrels would taste different. One, maybe the guy toasting the barrel decided to have a cigarette.
No, I was going to tell that story. I was with at a small cooperage house one time in France, and the guy's smoking a cigarette, and I asked him how he knows when it's medium toast or medium plus toast, and he walked over, looked at the head, pointed to it, and said, "It says medium plus toast on the head, so it's medium plus toast in the barrel." And that was his answer was, that's because it's marked that way. That's what it's got to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've done, all those things add up to increasing the quality year in and year out.
You mentioned it being, or things have dried out, and I'm not even talking specifically about this wine. This is more of a kind of a California thing. I find it fascinating these days that I think white wines in California have gotten drier as a whole, but red wines as a whole have gotten sweeter these days with the Prisoner and wines like that. It's a really interesting, odd trend, it seems like.
It is, and it's a trend that we're not going down.
No,
because it's an opportune moment, or just that, a trend that will die in the end. At the end of the day, if you're in this for the long haul, and the Jackson family is, they want to be around 600 years from now, and they're planning to do that. You don't go with the trends and make a bunch of sweet red wine and make a bunch of money off of it and then try the next canned item or whatever. You got to stick with the tried and the true, and kind of go with the ups and downs of that, but know that that's what's going to be here in 20 years, 50 years, or 100 years. The sweet Prisoners or sweet Myomis that aren't, true to type. I mean, people love it now, more power to them, but that's not going to be around. I highly doubt it in 50 years.
Yeah, I would agree. So
it wouldn't be around in the higher end arena.
Right. So I'm also drinking this Hawkeye Mountain Cabernet. And, how much like Cabernet is made by Kendall-Jackson in comparison to like Chardonnay, more or less? I mean, I don't need an exact amount, but is it a...
Oh, let me think. Well, it used to be a 10th. Now it's more like a 20th.
Okay.
Probably. And so a lot less. And what's interesting, for us, we have certain rules, internal rules. No Chardonnay should come from anywhere but the cool California coast. Same with Pinot. No Bordeaux reds should come from south of the Golden Gate Bridge or Lake County. Okay. So that leaves Mendocino, Napa, and Sonoma for cabs. And one of the visions that Jess had in the beginning was he would go after great land, great dirt, great sites. And so for our Cabernet, for the company, and all of this went to KJ in the beginning. All the Beater Peaks of Napa, the Howell Mountains would end, and Jess would like lead me up and down. Randy, what on earth are you doing? Say, well, we have more than all the other brands can deal with. So what do you want to do? And well, we'll use it. And or they would be new vineyards and nobody wanted to touch them. So we would, kind of train them and get them going. And then everybody say, oh my God, that Knights Valley cab, that rocks. And then all of a sudden, everybody's after it. But we have these killer vineyards that just make great cabs and Merlots and all kinds of Bordeaux. And so the Hawkeye is one that's from that sort of the ridge along the Mayacamas mountain chain there on the east side of Alexander Valley and Sonoma County. So that's all very mountainous and volcanic rock. It kind of started out up at Alexander Mountain Estate, and we have sort of three great vineyards along that ridge. Alexander Mountain Estate, sort of in the middle. To the south would be the Knights Valley, a mountain, and then just to the north is the Alden vineyard. And it's maybe a lot of the Hawkeye, depending on the vintage, we're kind of moving from Hawkeye being Alexander Mountaintop to Alden Mountaintop, but you can see each other. And the Alden is actually a little bit higher. And who knows, we've got another vineyard called Pine Mountain, also along that same ridge. And they're all maybe, 2 to 7 miles apart, but they all have spectacular views. If you have a vineyard with a great view, you're going to make great wine for sure. And that's that, and it's 100% cap.
Is there, and I assume there is, but maybe you can correct me on this. So when you're making like the VR Chardonnay, you talked about the consistency. You have all of these properties that you're getting fruit from. You're blending it together. You're taking Santa Barbara, and so you can do it pretty consistently year in, year out. When you do a vineyard designated cab, in this particular case, it's true. It can be true with Pinot as well, but I think particularly like mountainside Cabernet, you can have great variances in yield and in vintage differences can be exacerbated. I mean, do you find that to be the case?
Well, absolutely. What happens is the more finite your source becomes, the more the effect of the vintage and Mother Nature and whatever she throws at you. So when you get down to that narrow little spot on earth, the terroir of all terroirs, that footprint there, now you're going to have a greater degree of variance from vintage to vintage, sometimes where you might not even bottle it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, or a tiny percentage of barrels make the cut or whatever the case. I mean, yeah, that's that makes complete sense. So with vintages, recent vintages, and I mean, obviously, I'm drinking the cab right now as well, but just kind of your overall thought on recent California vintages. This is the 17 I'm drinking, and then the Chardonnay is the 19. But I mean, like, what are standouts? I mean, you make how many different grape types is into wine? I mean,
I'd had to take a minute to count through my head, but let's just call it, I don't know, 20. But
sure.
but there's the major 5 or 7, 9, 5, 7, 9. But I guess I forgot what the question was.
Well, so like 17. I found 17 to be a
15,
warmer vintage for Pinot, but a really good like Bordeaux vintage. I don't know what your thoughts are on each year. What kind of stands out, and what were the years like right now?
Yeah, I mean, on the Chard side, the 15s, 17s, 19s are great. On the cabs, I mean, they're all pretty darn good. I mean, what we've been having a challenge with it late, and it's hard to just say, okay, and I don't even want to go there, say, oh, the Cabernets from 2018, it probably wasn't a good year for such and such a reason. You can't say that anymore. And I quit saying that 15 years ago because, because we have all these different spots. So if you're a really small winery, you have one cab vineyard, well, then you can start talking like that. But we have the greater opportunity to have a lot more areas, a bigger playground. So you can say, well, geez, the Hawkeye Ridge was spectacular. Oh gosh, the Cougar Ridge didn't do so good because of its orientation, and it wasn't that old of a vineyard, and they got fried by the heat. Or you go down to to Knights Valley, and which direction is the vineyard pointed, or the aspect, and then maybe Mendocino is just perfect. So I can't answer your question,
Okay.
when it talks like that, because it isn't as simple as that.
Sure. Well, okay. Then with 2020, how did you fare? I mean, that's a year which certainly had more than its share of challenges in California.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want to, you're sort of leading into the fire situation. And so, one year, and I'm starting to get old enough where I'm can't remember my years correctly, but there was the one year where we had the fires, but everybody had picked everything except for Veeder Peak and the higher parts of Napa. And that
I think that was 17, I believe. I don't know. The fire years all kind of run together, but yes.
They do. And then there's the year where, we had fires in the, like in 2008 or something in the middle of the summer up in Mendocino. And then, this last year we had the 20, we had the fires. We had fires everywhere, it seemed like, but we had the fires on the, Northwest County. And then we had the fire from Napa coming back over to Santa Rosa, which burned what it didn't burn 2 years before, I think. And then we had fire down in Monterey. And most all of these fires came before the harvest, usually, the middle or the end of the harvest. So last year was an interesting year because it was just harvest was just about to get started. And it actually didn't look too bad. The one across from Healdsburg, in that area, I can't remember, it started with a W, but that fire, and all of the smoke went up and the valley was clear, the sky was blue. Well, that was only good for 2 days. And then, the inversion layer came and the smoke sunk and, laid there in the Russian River Valley. And then it eased its way up I was up in Mendocino, Anderson Valley, on a beautiful day. And then the next day it was all smoky. Well, there's no fire there, but it was down in the Russian River area. So a lot of people are freaking out over that and want to just throw their hands up in the air and give up. But I mean, that's for wussies. You need to try to do the best job you can. And if it doesn't work, well, then it doesn't work. But at least you can go to bed saying, I tried.
Sure.
And it was our MO. And so try to make the best wine and try not to do all these like some crazy things to the wines where you might not ever use them. Try to make the wine, and then if it turns out great, hallelujah. And if it doesn't, so be it. And so a lot of folks are learning that their freak out moments were not warranted at the end of the day. And I think that's what a lot of folks are learning.
I certainly
vintage is actually better than anybody realized because it was a fantastic growing season all the way up to those fires.
Yeah. To me, I mean, one of the things I found certainly, and this is more kind of just a consumer takeaway, but I think like Santa Barbara County was stunningly good, and it did not deal with the fires at all.
Yeah, they had effectively nothing. I mean, there's a couple random days where some smoke drifted down from San Luis Obispo, but it was didn't warrant any concern. But you sometimes have to check these things.
Yeah.
That Monterey part where it wiped out the whole southwest side of the whole Salinas Valley, that was amazing there. But then again, you start testing these things, and it's sort of in pockets and in elevation. The year we had a lot of fires in Anderson Valley, it was an elevational kind of an aspect.
Yep. I also found the smoke this year in the effects when it did affect grapes to be different than compared to like 2008 that year. I noticed on the nose so much. This year it was more kind of on the finish, at least in comparison. I mean, it seemed different to me than back in 2008.
Right. It's definitely on the finish. The aromatic part isn't too bad, but 08 was all in the nose, barbecue nose.
Yeah. Did you find that whites were pretty clean too? I mean, compared to reds, I mean, generally that's what I have seen.
Yeah, more often than not, that's the case all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is, with your whites, you're picking the grapes and you press them straight away. So there's really very little skin contact time. And
Yep.
that's where the smoke kind of tends to lay into, is this, the skins. And so if it's a red grape and you're making red wine out of it, you're fermenting it. The fermentation happens with the juice and the pulp and the skins and everything. It sits there and it all kind of gets absorbed, and you have to deal with it that way. If you're going to make a whole lot of rosé, it'd be just fine. So it's just a matter of how quickly you can get converted into whatever wine you're going to make.
Sure. So right now, I mean, obviously, I've got these two wines open. There's other lots of different other things you make, and I know this could be an unfair question. I'm not going to ask what your favorite is, because that is definitely an unfair question. I've got 3 kids, and you can't say who the favorite is, except only one of them is tuning in right now, Christian Lee. So he is certainly currently my favorite child out of all of them for having been here. But what's exciting you? That's, to me, easier to answer sometimes than like, what is your favorite? But is there something that you are finding, that's going to be coming up, some wine that's going to be released, or just some category, or the Pinots are particularly great, or what's exciting to you?
Well, we're doing a lot of work up in the Anderson Valley, up on the mountains and the ridges up there, and a lot of we've done a lot of replants, and are now coming into fruition. They've developed their root systems, and they're very, very, very exciting and very powerful. In fact, sometimes almost too good or too powerful, where you have to appreciate a very dark and tannic Pinot that's almost like a Merlot. But that is a really cool, no pun intended there on the climate, region, for sure. And so a lot of excitement there. And then, we continue to work with the various Chardonnays, new developments and replants that we're doing in the Santa Maria Valley and Santa Rita Hills right now, in the Los Alamos Valley. So there's a lot of stuff coming up there that's untested from our perspective, and we can't wait for that.
Sure.
That's a very exciting part.
That is fun, and it's got to be fun. Yeah, what do you say? You're 28 years in now, something like that.
Right.
To have something new and different is got to be. It kind of is what keeps us going in some ways. I started in '94, so I'm 25. I don't know, 27 years into winemaking. You've been winemaking longer than your time at JFW, but nonetheless,
40 plus.
We got a few vintages behind us between the two of us, Randy. And
that's
yet,
right.
It's fun to have something new and exciting and interesting and different come along.
Absolutely. And then, there's also, we've kind of gotten a little lax over the past probably 8 years, but I think, with this opportunity for some, replants that we're doing to, play with more clones, because
Right.
there's constant work being done with the clones. It's like it's Chardonnay, but there are different clones. Like down in Chile, on this one project we're working on down there, we planted this clone 546. Well, 546, I've heard of it. I've tasted it once or twice hither and Heather, but I've never really been able to dial that little baby in. But it's my favorite clone for the south of Chile right now. It's over the top, and there's stuff like that, and then learning, because we're always learning all the time. Where does that little grape and clone do best?
Yeah.
What dirt does it like, and what climate does it like, and where does it perform its best? And that just keeps us all going day in and day out.
So you are a bit further down the line of winemaking than I am. Where does this journey lead to eventually? Is there a point that Randy retires? Is there a point that you decide I'm just going to keep making, but I want to just concentrate on this? Or do you just keep doing what you're doing until you die stirring a barrel or something like that. I mean, what's the plan?
Yeah, I don't know if I really have a plan, but I'm not going to do this forever. I realized, at the age that I am now, I probably have 15 to 17, good years left, knock on wood.
Sure.
Nothing goes wrong. And then after that, I'll be, with a stroller, pushing myself up and down the non-paved vineyards. But, sometime in the near future, I've been training everybody I work with to do what they're doing. And someday, who knows, one might just work half time, or one might travel. Heaven only knows.
So Christian, my son, who's on here, one time told me that, don't worry, Dad, I will stick you on top of a hill overlooking a vineyard in your wheelchair, and I'll still bring people up to you to meet you and talk to you every now and then. I'm like, while I'm running the winery, and I'm like, fantastic, son. I appreciate that very, very much.
Eventually, I'll push you down the hill, but
yeah, you might push me down the hill. Exactly.
Well, you're lucky to have Christian there.
Yes. No, but I do think, as I've gotten further into this, you start to think, how many more years and how much do I want to do, and what do I want to, and what do I really want to do, given, this many vintages up? What do I really want to concentrate on at some point in time?
I'm going to start concentrating more on skiing.
Sure. Skiing, and then now with Tequila Mexico, time there. No
exactly
there, but I bet you're enjoying yourself otherwise. So
totally.
Yeah. Well, I think we've reached the end of an hour, folks. Randy, I appreciate you taking time out of your vacation here to talk with us. So
oh no, my pleasure. It's always an honor and a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you when I get back. We'll go have a shot of tequila, a beer, and a glass of wine.
Yes, and maybe in that order. Yeah, that sounds perfect. Thank you, Randy. Thanks everybody for joining me. Appreciate it. Take care.
Have a nice night.
Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, Feliz Cinco de Mayo.
What did he have?
Tequila. L'chaim.